What's up, everyone? Welcome to the 105K Q&A. Let's jump right into it. The first question from Ferdinand Focus 489, Liss versus Hiit cardio for heart health. Or should one do both to maximize heart health? So I would say probably a good idea to do both. If I had to choose one, I would probably go with low intensity steady state, but that's just because the weight training that I do is going to interfere with the high intensity interval training and vice versa. But if I was only interested in heart health, I would probably go with high intensity interval training and then just general activity levels in terms of a step count. In my view, high intensity interval training can get you all of the benefits of low intensity steady state and then some, but low intensity doesn't necessarily get you the benefit of high intensity interval training. It's not getting your heart rate elevated to the point where it's going to cause those significant adaptations. All right, question 19. What are your thoughts on pre-exhaust training, such as doing cable flies before a bench pressing movement versus regular compounds first, then isolation type training? So I would say for most people, the regular doing your compounds first and then your isolations later is the best way of going about things. The only time that I would pre-exhaust would be if you are intentionally trying to limit the weight that you're going to use. So let's say you had some kind of shoulder issue and you didn't want to use as much weight on the bench press, but you still wanted the bench press. Sure, I think pre-exhausting with some kind of isolation might make sense, but for most people, I would say it's not going to be the way to go. Just do your compounds first and then isolate later. All right, question 18, I did ask for tough questions, so I kind of deserve this. How many squats does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop? 12 people decided to upvote this one. Okay, so here it is. It's on the Q&A. I would say one. Assuming you're squatting on it, the mechanical pressure would degrade the Tootsie Roll, the Tootsie Pop enough to get to the center. Just the one. Question 17, once you have arrived at your desired physique, do you still need to hit the gym regularly and with as much intensity as you had up to that point? So the short answer is no, but I would say you're better off thinking about this in terms of volume rather than effort. Okay, if you are slacking off in terms of your effort, you probably won't even maintain, realistically speaking. But if you look at it more like, okay, well, I did this much volume at this much effort to get here, now I can reduce the volume, right? Like, why would you spend more time doing half-assed sets to try to maintain? You're better off just taking the same high effort and focus and mentality and intention and execution into the sets that you're doing and just doing fewer sets. And the good news is that number of sets is very, very low, somewhere between a third and maybe as low as a ninth of the volume that it took to build up your physique. I do think that this might vary a little bit based on how advanced you are. So if you get to what is hypothetically your intermediate level physique, and you could be advanced, but you choose not to, well, that would be easy to maintain. But if you get to like the pinnacle of what is possible for you after like 12 or 15 years of super, super dedicated, quote unquote, optimized training, well, that's going to be tougher to maintain. So it depends on how high up that mountain you climb as well. All right, next question. Do you recommend locking out on dumbbell chest presses and dumbbell overhead presses? If so, any tips on improving lockout on those movements? So I don't have any tips on that because I don't think that's even the difficult part of the range of motion, right? Like on a dumbbell bench press going from here to here, that's not really a sticking point for anyone unless maybe you have some kind of weird elbow issue that prevents you from locking, in which case don't lock at all. Like, it's the challenging part of the range of motion, but that's because of your individual anatomy, so you're better off just not doing that. I would say there's no real need to lock out. Maybe on something like a dip, where the very last few inches of the range of motion actually have a good amount of tension, especially for the triceps, that might make sense to actually fully lock out. But on a dumbbell press, it's not really working the triceps the same as a dip or a barbell, where you're actually getting like that locking out sensation. It's coming across the body, or it's coming across at the top. So I would say you don't necessarily need to lock out. there's not much resistance there anyway. There's probably very, very minimal benefit, and so you don't need to bother. Question 14, is it possible to train upper abs versus lower abs? Aren't they parts of the same rectus abdominis muscle fibers? So this would be like targeting inner versus outer chest. So yeah, there is some EMG data for whatever that's worth. I think Brett Contreras did not a study, but a case study on himself where he did, I think it was hanging leg raises or maybe reverse crunches versus typical crunches, which are going to be working the upper abs. And there were massive differences in EMG activation. I'll try to find, I think it was a T-Nation article. I'll try to find the exact stats, but they were like a massive difference in terms of activation. Also, anecdotally, the further I go along this fitness thing, the more I realize a lot of the old school guys had it right. And so if they were doing a movement for upper abs or for lower abs, this wasn't just like them making shit up. It's because they felt it in that area or because they saw results from this movement causing this or this other movement causing this in a slightly different area. And so just because they are the same muscle fiber, that doesn't mean you can't necessarily target different parts of this. And you can probably do this experiment yourself, right? Like you can tilt your pelvis using your lower abs, and then you can crunch around your ribs using your upper abs. And those are two different things using different parts of the muscle. All right, next question. Is it true that people who train in only specific rep ranges that are lower, reasonably like 4 to 8, have muscles that are more granite-like compared to people who train in the higher rep ranges, 12 to 15 only, have more softer, per se, muscles? This might sound weird to you, but I heard about this theory first on the YouTube channel Mind Pump Show. I think there's maybe something here, because you do see some people who train in higher reps, and they're more like pumpers, right? So they get a big result from a pump. When they're not pumped, they don't look as impressive, but they get a pump and it looks, totally different. I would probably put myself more in this category. Like we gotta fluff it up a little bit first, right? Otherwise, it just doesn't look as impressive, right? So make sure you fluff it up before you take pictures and put it out into the internet, just so you're not really embarrassed about it. And then there's other people where they're basically the same all the time. If they get a pump, they don't get a pump, same shit. This might be due to myofibrillar versus sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, although the evidence here is not great. It's fairly mixed. I think it's plausibly, in a logical way, it's logically plausible that this might be the case, but in terms of evidence for it, not super solid. All right, next one, question 13. This guy asked a lot of questions. They were all upvoted. Actually, they're very, very good questions. Thoughts on power building, where you use evolving rep ranges of 4 to 8 on compound movements and go to technical failure, and use isolations from reps 8 to 12 and go to absolute failure as a viable approach for intermediates or even beginners, except linear progression for beginners. So I don't hate this.
Not great, not terrible.
But I also don't love it either. And I think this is for the reason where always going to technical failure, especially on deadlifts, probably not a great idea. It's not that 4 to 8 is a bad idea on deadlifts. It's just that technical failure, like every time you do deadlifts, is probably not the way to go. You're probably better off keeping a couple or even 3 or 4 reps in reserve, and then you can use quote-unquote accessory movements. I guess in this case they are accessory movements because you're a power builder, in order to sort of train closer to failure. Some movements, they just bite back harder than others. Same thing for low bar squats. If you're always going to failure, even if it's just technical failure, that's still going to be very, very limiting in terms of the volume that you can do, and you're probably exposing yourself to unnecessary risk, especially as you get stronger. And this is where a lot of people, they have to learn the lesson one way or another, that you can't train in the sort of starting strength way, as you did as a beginner for the rest of your career, right? Like you're going to have to pick and choose your battles. You're going to have to manage fatigue better. You're going to have to treat every movement a little bit differently. But I don't think it's possible to say all compounds do this, 4 to 8 technical failure, all isolations 8 to 12 go to absolute failure. I think that's a decent starting point, but it'll probably need to be tweaked. Next question, same dude. They were all in order. They all had like 20-something upvotes, likes, whatever, thumbs ups. Is it worth taking into account muscle fiber types and using lower reps to medium reps on muscles that are more type 2 twitch dominant, such as biceps, hamstrings, triceps, etc., or vice versa? So again, this is one of those things that logically makes sense, but there's not really a whole lot of evidence for. And again, this is one of those things where it was bro science before, but hasn't really been proven. And I would maybe go by movement rather than muscle group, right? Because you also don't know if you are more slow twitch or more fast twitch. And you might think, oh, I can get more reps, therefore I'm slow twitch. You don't know that. You don't know that, okay? Like that's a big leap that hasn't really been shown to always be the case. And you might say, oh, I'm good at 1 rep maxes, I must be fast twitch. That's not really how it works. Now, if you're very, very good at sprinting, that's where, you probably are fast twitch. If you're very, very good at marathoning, well, yeah, you're probably more slow twitch, at least in the relevant muscles. But in weight training, it's not as big of a difference between like sets of 5 and sets of 10 versus sprinting and marathoning, right? And so I don't think it's going to be easy to parse apart those small differences in rep range. And I also don't think it's really going to provide any benefit, even if you go and get a biopsy, which most people are not going to be doing because it's annoying and it's painful. And I think it can maybe even impact recovery in some cases. So I would say, in general, my answer here is no. I would take a more practical approach where you go based on the movement. Okay, so you say, okay, what are my goals? I'm squatting. I want to improve my 1 rep max. Okay, sets of 20. It's far away from there. It's probably not going to directly support the goal, but maybe my sets of 20 help my sets of 15. My sets of 15 help my sets of 10. My sets of 10 help my sets of 5. My sets of 5 help my sets of 3. Help my doubles, help my single, right? But that's a lot of leaps. And the more leaps you take and the less specific the training is going to be, the less direct carryover you're going to have. And some movements just are not suitable for higher reps, and other movements are just not suitable for lower reps, right? So don't do lateral raises for sets of 3. Don't do barbell rows for singles, right? Like, what's your 1 rep max RDL? Why would you even test that, right? Biceps curls, you can max out if you want, but given that the movement is going to be for muscle growth, there's no point in having a 1 rep max. I guess unless you're doing a strict curl competition. But in general, if you're training for hypertrophy, you're not even going to be thinking about a 1 rep max for the movements that you're doing hypertrophy training with. Next question, would you be open to making more videos on the topic of sprinting, proper sprinting format, how to actually apply them properly? So I actually have at least one video on sprinting, if not a few. But the thing about YouTube is that people subscribe for a reason, and then it's tough to sort of get out of why people subscribe. So I would say most people subscribed for hypertrophy-focused training, and so it is difficult to move into other topics, and those videos just tend to do quite poorly in terms of views. And when they do poorly in terms of views, it gets pushed out to fewer people. And one of the fastest ways to kill your channel, it's not to not upload. It's to upload shit that people don't click on, right? Like if I have, let's say I put out 5 stinkers in a row, even if it's good content, if it's quality, if it's well-researched, whatever, if it's 5 videos that people just don't click on, that really kills your channel. Not completely, but every time someone sees a video and doesn't click on it, it makes your videos less likely to surface for them in the future. So it's a shame, but it's very easy to get sort of pigeonholed into one style or topic of video. So if enough people are interested in, comment down below if you're really, really interested in it. I might work it into something else, but I won't be putting out like a ton of videos on running because I don't think that really makes a lot of sense. All right, next question. If you were a novice lifter where reducing your body fat percentage was your priority, would you emphasize strength training or hypertrophy style training on big compound lifts if the goal was to retain as much lean tissue during your cut as possible? I would say hypertrophy style training. What gains muscle maintains muscle. So for the most part, there might be some very, very slight differences in terms of like satellite cell activation or being more defensive during a cut. But I would say, generally speaking, yeah, what is going to retain your muscle is going to be what gains muscle, and that is by definition hypertrophy training. Next question, do you hate the idea of Gshred portraying the natty potential ridiculously low? Well, I hate the idea. He's been super inconsistent with his natty or nots, right? Like there will be someone who looks just completely fucking absurd and he'll be like, yeah, they're natty. And then someone else where he'll be like, I don't think they're natural. And I'll look at the physique and I'll be like, I don't know. That looks plausible to me. So he's like, in some ways he says like, oh, picture your goal physique and then cut it in half. Well, you don't know what someone else is picturing, right? They could be picturing something that is doable in a year, right? And then other people, yeah, their expectations are super fucked and they're just like never ever going to get there. And so I agree in that case, but he's really prone to making these blanket statements and maybe projecting his own goals or feelings onto his audience. If you can't see your abs, you're fat, that kind of thing. Like, oh, 225 bench press after 5 years, like that's what you should expect, that kind of shit. And so he's kind of all over the place, but then he said his own physique, was like 26.5 FFMI, which is huge. And so, yeah, I don't know what to think. Like he's just very logically inconsistent with his natty or nots and like with his message and what is possible and what potential is. So, this isn't me throwing shade. It's just like kind of being genuinely confused with, is he blackpilling people? Is he not? Is he inspiring people? Is he not? Like, it's just really, really inconsistent. Next question. Please, guys, vote for this comment. It's my second time posting on Geoff's channel. Congrats, Geoff. Thank you. Love and appreciate the channel. Here's my question. I've heard you say longer rest time between sets is most effective for hypertrophy. This makes sense. But then I've also heard someone legit like Sean Nalwani talk about the effectiveness of myo reps. And I've talked about myo reps as well and how they are very, very effective. So yeah, I agree with Sean there. My question is, if myo reps are effective for hypertrophy, why is shorter rest periods between sets not? And if both methods of training are effective to a certain degree, how much more effective would you say longer rest periods are than using myo reps? So I actually was wondering this myself. Eric Helms did a really, really good explanation of this on the Team 3DMJ website, and I'll link that in the description below. But basically, it's that for some movements, the limiting factor is central fatigue. So if you're doing squats, longer rest periods are better because otherwise your cardiovascular system is going to be the limiting factor. You're just going to be tired. You're going to be breathing hard. And so you're not actually going to be able to take the muscles to failure, right? Because you're going to be limited by other systems. And so if you look at what most people, myself included, recommend myo reps for, it's not deadlifts, it's not squats, it's not even stuff like lunges, because even if you're in very, very good shape, if you're doing like an activation set of 15 to 20 on squats, genuinely close to failure, resting, a few breaths, and then trying to do 5 reps again, 5 reps again, 5 reps again, the limiting factor is going to be your cardiovascular system or your willpower, right? And so usually we recommend myo reps for smaller isolation movements where the limiting factor is not going to be cardiometabolic, right? So if you're doing a cable lateral raise, I really hope that your heart rate is not going to be, 180 beats per minute. If it is, you have bigger problems. All right, next question. Can you talk about how to mix weightlifting with distance running? So I assume by weightlifting, you mean just general hypertrophy or weight training and not Olympic weightlifting. If you do mean Olympic style snatch and clean and jerk weightlifting, my answer would be, I don't know. I don't really have a lot of experience with that. So I don't really know how to program that. No one has ever asked me for a custom training plan with that. It's not something I would even write. I would just recommend someone else. But if you mean general weight training, I would say that you probably want to prioritize one or the other and have the other one be secondary. You can try to have them be completely equally, but you're most likely going to want to take a phasic approach. So maybe you focus on distance running more for 2, 3, 4 months, then you switch. I think that can work well. If you really want to prioritize neither or prioritize both at the same time, I would say try not to run on tired legs. That would be my main recommendation. You might be able to get away with it, but especially, I mean, if you do a bunch of RDLs and then you go distance run, I have not found that to end well, and I've tried it. You're better off doing the distance running first and then weight training when tired. Running seems to provide more injuries than weight training. And so I would be more wary of running on tired legs than on lifting with tired legs, right? Lifting with tired legs, okay, the weight is reduced slightly. Not a big deal. But running on tired legs, really not the best idea. And I know the interference effect is a little bit overblown, but I find that distance running is the fastest way for me to kill my progress in the gym. It's faster than not training at all. It's faster than a calorie deficit. It's faster than crappy sleep. If I had the goal of absolutely losing as much muscle mass as possible, as quickly as possible, I would distance run. I would do low calories, all that stuff. But I find that even if I'm trying to keep performance, it makes it very, very challenging, possibly because I have a long history of distance running. Some people can maybe get away with it more. It depends on how high your level is at each one. If your level is low at each, you can improve both simultaneously quite easily. But it depends on how far you want to push each one. And if you want to be really good at either one, you're going to have to sacrifice the other at some point. What body fat percentage do you think you should cut down to make the most of your next bulk? I would say as lean as you can without it getting shitty. So you see some people, they get super, super lean because they're trying to potentiate the P ratio or something like that. That's not really as much of a thing as we used to think it was. It might not be a thing at all. And I do see that often people just rebound. So they get down to 8% body fat or something, completely diced, and then they just rebound. And so they basically just wasted their time, right? They could have stopped at 12% or 11% or 13% when it was starting to get, walking through mud. But, they kept going, and then, the diet bitch slapped them back up to 18% in a matter of, a month and a half or something. So you want to really go down as low as you can, but there will be a point where you're feeling kind of crappy, your energy is lower, etc. And this cut, I'm going to be getting very, very, very lean, stage condition. But that under no circumstances is helping a future bulk. It's not like me hacking my metabolism and getting super lean so I partition. No, it's just, for me, it's just an interesting challenge, right? It's not actually going to be useful or helpful for long-term progress at all. Usually I would stop at around this level of leanness, right? When I start seeing a vein in the middle of my abs, when I start seeing, very defined Christmas tree, vein in the upper back, when I start getting, cool veins on my arms, that kind of shit, that's usually when my body says, all right, buddy, all right, you've gotten lean enough, and then I can reverse direction. And I also do think it's important to reverse direction slowly. This is one thing I've probably not been very good at in the past, where, diet's over, boom. No, I think you want to gradually reverse so that you get the most out of your bulk. And obviously these percentages are going to be individual, but for most people, it's probably going to be somewhere in the low teens, maybe towards 10%. For some people, it might be a little bit higher, maybe 17, 18%, but I try to get people as low as possible without it becoming really hard work. If someone is like 23, 24% and they're feeling a little bit tired, I might push them a little bit lower as long as I don't think that they're going to rebound. And this is where knowing the person, communication is super important. And you really want to avoid getting shredded, but you also don't want to end your cut at like 26% and be like, time to bulk. No. All right, next question. What is your favorite video game growing up? I think you mean what was, or do you? Maybe we're all always growing up. I would say Baldur's Gate. That was the first video game or computer game that I remember playing. Planescape Torment, Icewind Dale, Neverwinter Nights, just, nerdy RPG games. And I think a lot of content creators, they rail sometimes unnecessarily on video games. It's one of those things where if it's a problem, it's a problem. If it's not a problem, it's not a problem, right? But it's not a problem for everyone. For me, it became a problem at some times, right? Like, I think particularly MMOs. MMOs fuck some people up where they're playing them, 8, 9, 10 hours a night or a day. I've been in that situation and worse, where you're pulling all-nighters and then another all-nighters and you haven't slept in days, and some people die from that shit, right? So if it's an addiction, it's a problem, and it's definitely been an addiction for me at some points. But right now I spent some time away from them, and now I've returned to them, and I found that I'm more mature and I'm able to balance it better with work and relationships and working out. And if it's an hour or two a day, I don't see an issue with it. In fact, actually, one of the reasons I think I did well on the verbal SAT, surprisingly well, was because a lot of these games involved a lot of reading, a lot of vocabulary. So I think they can be fun. There can be benefits to them as long as it is in balance with the rest of your life. Let's see some other games in my GOG account. Thief, Gold, Temple of Elemental Evil, Icewind Dale, Tomb Raider, Heroes of Might and Magic, Dragon Age, sick game, Pillars of Eternity, Diablo, Morrowind, Skyrim, Oblivion, etc. So, I'll nerd out from time to time. Next question, back to training. How to avoid or minimize chances of tendonitis when bodybuilding? Thanks. No problem. So I would say there are a bunch of things you can do. Alec Onkiri actually did a really, really good, I think it was a rehab video, which I will link in the description if I remember. Definitely check it out. Excellent. In fact, I haven't made a video on that topic because I think he nailed it so hard that there's no need to. I would say slow, controlled tempos, full ranges of motion. If you're doing quarter squats, for a lot of people, knee tendonitis is in your future. Moderate volumes, not overdoing things, maybe slight pauses in the bottom position of presses or of squats, that type of thing. Really being on top of things with listening to your body. Like if you wake up in the morning and your elbow is a bit stiff, that's a sign. If you're warming up in the gym and your elbow is a little bit stiff, that's a sign. If it's getting stiffer over time and there's a little bit of pain that is showing up, if you're doing a skull crusher and your elbow's like, hey, what are you doing, dude? Hey, stop it. Maybe you should stop it. Or you can modify your technique. Usually there are other options that are going to be more joint friendly. Some variations are notorious for ripping up the joints. Skull crushers for the elbows, a lot of really wide grip benching for the shoulders can be tough. For the elbows, chin-ups are not great for a lot of people. I think using dumbbells for a lot of movements can really help to alleviate things. Having a decent amount of exercise variation and variety, also very, very useful. If you're always hammering the same few movements, I think the opportunity for overuse is just so much higher. I also do think that time off is almost certainly not going to be very much help. I've heard so many stories of someone who got tendonitis, took a month off from the gym, went back, and nothing helped. It just didn't get better at all. And so you're going to want to have blood flow, have a bunch of movements, and I go into this in my latest book, where you can do them for higher reps just to get blood into the area. Okay, so this might be a leg extension for your knees. No, they're not going to be killing your gains. Jeff Cavalier says this is a horrible movement. but it's also used in rehab, right? Like, funny how that works. Face pulls, speaking of Geoff Cavalier, are also good. Band pull-aparts, hammer curls, whatever it takes to get blood into the area without pissing the injury off. All right, next question. What path should be taken by people with small calves and forearms? Hopefully a path leading off of a cliff. I'm just kidding. I'm just being edgy. Don't do anything crazy. We should all love and appreciate our small-limbed friends. So how frequently should we train them? In my case, compound movements were not enough to make them grow, so I'm putting more emphasis on isolation exercises. Good move. I would say start with a couple times a week, and then you might scale up to 3 times a week later, maybe even 4 times per week. But the higher the frequency, the greater the diminishing returns, in my opinion. And if you can't make good gains or get results or see visible progress on 3 times per week, I would look at other things first. I would look at your exercise selection, your technique, proximity to failure, all these things, before just putting more of what you're already doing by upping the frequency. But, that being said, if you're only training them once per week, I would not expect much for these muscle groups. They are very resilient. They can take a lot of punishment, so punish them. From the YouTube stats, do a lot of teens watch you? Because I consider myself lucky as a young teenager to find sources such as yours, Alex, Bald Omni-Man, Peep the Profile Pic, Basement Bodybuilding, NH, Alexander Bromley, and Stand Strength to learn from. Yeah, I would consider you, like, I'm not tooting my own horn here. I'm just saying that none of these channels are super mainstream. And that is a shame in a lot of ways, but you have to understand what makes a channel popular has unfortunately very little to do with the quality of information that they put out. It's more the packaging around the content. So it's the production value, it's the title, it's the thumbnail, it's the algorithm loves these things, it's the click-through rate, it's the watch time, it's people speaking dogmatically, it's people promising super results, it's the eye-popping physiques that get the most traction. An eye-popping physique online means, enhanced. So in terms of YouTube stats, I will put them on the screen. It looks like about 10%. YouTube breaks it down 13 to 17 and then 18 to 24, I think. So it doesn't just say teenagers, but just extrapolating, it looks like it's going to be about 10%, somewhere around there. I think this is lower than some other channels. I don't post shorts, and I would imagine shorts are disproportionately viewed by teenagers. And so I don't know exactly how this compares to other channels, but it looks to be around 10%. That's a great list, and it's an honor to be included among them. All right, number 1 question. What do you think is the best way to include training for lagging muscles like forearm or the neck in a predefined split, like PPL, upper, lower, full body, and many more? I'll be honest, I don't think it matters that much. For these smaller muscle groups, forearm, neck, calves, abs, that are almost always going to be trained through isolation movements and are not very, very taxing, I think you can put them just about anywhere, with maybe a few exceptions. Neck, put it anywhere, doesn't really impede anything else. Low fatigue, put it on any day, put it on every day. Build up to it, obviously, but this should not impact anything. Calves, I would not put them the day before a lower body day, although you could maybe build up to that eventually. They shouldn't be super taxing or super fatiguing, but calves are active during squats, during deadlifts, and so you might not want to put them like the day before that, but you can put them on lower body day. You can put them on any day that is not the day before lower body. Same thing for abs. I would not do a shitload of core work the day before lower body day. If you think about it, lower body work is kind of like lower body plus spinal erectors plus abs in a lot of cases. In general, lower body work is going to work the abs more than most upper body movements. So same thing there, just try not to be doing your big compound movements when you are fatigued. from the isolations, right? Best to prioritize. For forearms, similar thing, except the day before a pull workout or an upper body workout that has pulling, don't put them there. You can put them at the end of the pull day. You can, if you're doing push-pull legs, you can put them at the end of the pull day. You can put them at the end of the lower day, but don't put them at the end of the push day because it's going to impact the pull day the next day. And don't put them at the beginning of the pull day either, for obvious reasons. And if you find grip is the limiting factor for RDLs, well, don't put grip work the day before because it will likely be fatigued. But I would say most people should be using straps, so that is less of a concern. And you can also use straps for pulling stuff, but I like to use pulling work to also work the forearms as well. But that is a little bit of personal preference. So in summary, you can basically put them anywhere. Just don't put them somewhere where they're going to impact the quote-unquote more important work. All right, thank you so much for the questions. I hope this was useful. And if you want to support the channel, definitely check out my books on my website, verityfit.com. I don't have ads on the channel still. I might put them back on at some point. But this is the best way to support the channel. Thank you so much for the support, and thank you so much for watching. And I will see you in the next video. Peace.